The most well-known hairdresser in that little town was Madame Tim. Additionally, despite the many tasks she imposed on them, her salon was always full with apprentices, girls who remained for years. However, on the day she sent 3 of them to clean her home, things changed. They had no intention of opening her bedroom door. They didn't even suspect anything out of the ordinary. However, as soon as they moved in and carefully poked it, they saw something they were not meant to see. You would think she was a kind instructor from the outside. You would assume she had a golden heart and adored training young females. However, you would find a completely other reality if you entered her realm, seen what transpired before to the first client entering, and listened to her trainees' hushed sobs and murmurs. The apprentices showed there early every morning, eager to start their voyage in a dressing full of optimism and prepared to learn. However, Madame Tim would assign them tasks before they had a chance to touch a comb, never-ending tasks. Even when the mirrors were already immaculate, she would tell them to be cleaned. Even if you could already see your reflection on the tiles, she would order you to scrub the floor once again. I cook for my kids, clean my upstairs room, go to the market, sweep the courtyard, and wash my clothing. The girls would sprint till their legs gave out. She pretended, however, that they had done nothing. Additionally, Tim instantly stopped them anytime they attempted to learn anything, picked up a comb to separate a customer's hair, or made a little step to practice. She would yell if you dropped it. "You're not prepared. My customer's hair will be ruined by you." This became their daily existence. There was a lot of labor, a lot of reprimands, and little learning. But this is the bit that really disturbed Tim. Customers saw the apprentice's potential despite her best efforts to conceal it. Customers would remark things like, "This girl's hands are gentle. I like her touch." Another would smile and say, "Why don't you let this apprentice attend to me? She seems gifted." While these remarks seemed harmless to the customers, Madame Tim saw them as threats. She first feigned not to give a damn. She made an effort to grin. She courteously acknowledged the patrons. However, something sinister started to stir within her. She began keeping a careful eye on the apprentices out of fear rather than pride. She tallied the number of times a client complimented them. She saw how patrons gazed at them. Every time they touched even a little bit of hair, she could see how rapidly they picked it up. And the more she observed, the more terrified she became. What happens if they complete their education and start their own businesses? What if they take my customers? What if I become irrelevant? What if? What if? She asked herself as fear steadily covered her heart like a shadow. However, Mrs. Pamela's call was the day everything changed and her dread took control. Mrs. Pamela was a powerful and affluent member of the neighborhood. When she talked on the phone, her tone was upbeat. "Please send Shamaka, your apprentice. For home service, Madame Zamb. We liked the way she braided my friend's hair last week." Tim's stomach constricted. "Ma, I am available. I can come myself," was her swift response, but the lady softly persisted. "Her hands are tidy and cautious." "No, madam. We really want Chiamaka." Tim took a deep breath. Once again she pushed. "I'm capable of handling it. Today is my free day." However, the lady firmly said, "Please send the girl. We prefer her." The words, "we prefer her," pierced Tim's heart like a dagger. Slowly, she hung up the phone and turned to face Chiamaka, a tiny child who had no idea that she had started a storm. Zanab was unable to focus all day. Her thoughts was racing, her hands trembling. Her terror became more intense than before. She had trouble falling asleep that night. She again heard the customer's comments each time she closed her eyes. "Chiamaka is our preference. Chiamaka is our preference." She was overburdened by dawn. She had to speak with someone. She had to let go of the terror that was simmering inside her. So she went to her landlady, a friend, just to vent, get solace, and get guidance. She had no idea that the landlady possessed something very different, something she had not anticipated, something that would alter the destiny of every apprentice that entered her salon. She didn't search for anything odd. Charm was not what she expected. She didn't anticipate a solution that went beyond standard guidance. She just wanted an older person to speak to, someone who would know what it was like to be a company owner when the competition got closer every day. The landlady greeted her with her customary sly grin as she arrived at the home. "You look troubled," she remarked plainly. Tim gave a nod. The landlady sat down with her and said, "I just need to talk." Tim described everything with annoyance rather than tears or drama. She discussed how the apprentices were becoming too skilled, how customers were asking for them more often, how she was afraid of losing her clientele, and how she thought the apprentices were progressing more quickly than they ought to. The landlady kept silent and didn't say anything. Tim was perplexed when the elder lady calmly said, "Come back tomorrow morning," while folding her hands on her lap after Tim had finished. "Just come," the landlord said. "Why? What do you want to give me?" There was no justification or indication of anything out of the ordinary. Tim departed the home with only that little command, still unhappy, but a little comforted that she had at least spoken to someone. She came back the next morning, sitting next to a tiny covered dish on the table. The landwoman was already waiting. She gestured for Tim to have a seat as she came in. Lifting the cloth, she saw a little, dull, black clay pot with faint marks all over its body. Zainab's eyes became wide. "What is this?" The landlady placed her palm lightly on the pot. "This will keep your apprentices bound to you," she said. Startled, Zainab blinked. "Connected to me? I don't get it." The landlady gave a calm explanation. "They won't leave your salon before you want them to as long as their names are on this pot. They will continue to come back each day. They won't notice the passage of time for years. Something will bring them back, even if they get exhausted." Tim's breath seized in her chest as she gazed at the pot. This was not what she had requested. It was not what she had anticipated. All she had asked for was guidance. An encouraging ear, perhaps. But the landlady continued, "Whenever you accept a new apprentice, give them a form. Let them write their full name. You can collect money if you want. It will not look suspicious. When you get home, drop the paper inside this pot." Tim swallowed. "And that's all? That's all?" She hesitated, unsure if she should touch it or run away from it. The landlady said, "You're afraid of losing your customers. You said these girls are rising too fast. This is the only way to hold them down." There was silence, a long, heavy silence. Tim looked at the pot again. She thought of the apprentices she had trained in the past, the ones who left and opened small shops, the ones customers sometimes mentioned with praise. She thought of how quickly these new girls were learning, how customers were requesting them, how the world was changing, how she feared becoming irrelevant. Without saying a word, she reached forward and touched the pot. It was cold, too cold. She lifted it slowly, and in that quiet moment, a decision was made. One she didn't fully understand, one she would later regret, but one she felt she needed to make. She took the pot home, and that was the beginning, not of madness, not of cruelty, but of a silent, invisible chain that would hold many young girls in one place without them ever realizing why. The apprentices had no idea their fate was already shifting, and Madame Tim herself had no idea the price she would eventually pay. That morning, when she returned to the salon, she watched her apprentices with a new kind of confidence, a dark, settled confidence. Before, she hid her fear. Before, she worried they would grow too good. Before, she pretended to tolerate them. But now, she felt in control. She knew every girl who walked into that salon, every girl who wrote her name in the registration form, every girl who smiled politely and said, "I am ready to learn," would unknowingly drop her destiny into a pot sitting inside Zainab's wardrobe. And so, she became bolder. The first opportunity came 3 days later when a new apprentice arrived, a shy girl named Lami, whose mother brought her with hope in her eyes. "We want her to learn fast," the mother said. "She is hard-working. Please assist us." Tim grinned, but it never made it to her eyes. "Naturally," she said gently. "Complete this form. Enter her whole name." She was praised by the mother. She was thanked by Lami. Tim had already put the girl's name in the pot before it was time to close. She sat on her bed that evening, gazing contentedly at the pot. She had no sense of guilt. She didn't think twice. She didn't ask any questions. Recalling her landlady's comments, she only said, "Thank you." Zainab became more icy after the second week. She gave the trainees more work to do, and even though the floor was spotless, they washed it twice a day. Her clothing were washed twice, once in the morning and once again in the evening. For her family, they prepared breakfast, lunch, and supper. They never stopped doing errands. She never once let them practice braiding or styling without finding some excuse to stop them. "Do you refer to it as parting?" She lost her temper. "Do you really believe that with these irresponsible hands, consumers would trust you? You're too weak, too sluggish, and too preoccupied. Go tidy the rear room once again. It's filthy." The apprentices protested to their parents even when it wasn't. However, Something inside them drove them back to the business every morning. They were unable to comprehend it. They didn't challenge it. They just followed the unseen force. Tim also saw it, and she relished every moment of it. She cherished the girls' unwavering presence. Even when she criticized them, they apologized. How they came back day after day, certain that they were on the verge of learning something significant. Tim felt more untouchable the longer they remained. One afternoon, her landlady came to see how she was doing. She was greeted with almost too much warmth by Tim. "Thank you again for what you gave me," she continued, her voice lowered. The landlady grinned and said, "You didn't tell me it would work so perfectly. It's always effective. Unless you want to, you won't lose any apprentices." Tim nodded, her eyes shining. "Good," she said. "This is how I like it." And she really did. Now that she had the pot, she was no longer afraid of competition. She was not afraid of their advancement. She was not afraid of what was ahead. She held the key to their future. Weeks went by. Additionally, after a year, trainees who were supposed to study for 6 months were still sweeping the same floor. Every time they attempted to think about the future, girls who had previously dreamt of starting their own salons totally lost interest. Even those who made an effort to stop ended up coming back the next morning, as if something had pulled them back. Tim silently took pleasure in seeing it all. She felt her power increase each time she added a new name to the pot. She grinned to herself each time a female returned after attempting to flee. She calmly said, "She's not ready yet. I am shaping her." Every time a parent questioned why their daughter wasn't picking things up quickly, they believed her. Because the trainees were oddly devoted, oddly entrenched, and oddly unwilling to go on, they always trusted her. As the months went by, Tim behaved like a queen, cold, unflappable, untouchable. Their cries didn't matter to her. Their grievances didn't concern her. Their annoyance didn't concern her. Why ought she to? They had no intention of leaving. However, individuals who overindulge in authority have a tendency to become blind. And Madame Tim failed to see what was subtly simmering in her salon because she was so comfortable, wicked, and self-assured. It was one of those days when the salon was very busy, and it occurred on a calm Tuesday morning. Additionally, Madame Tim's apprentices were like machines. 3 of her daughters had started to make an effort to stand out. They moved more deftly. They grasped it more quickly. Something in them continued to go ahead despite all the tasks she put on. When Tim saw it, she didn't like it. So that morning, she pulled the 3 of them aside with her typical icy demeanor. You and you," she pointed angrily. "Leave the salon now. Go to my house and cook lunch. When you finish, clean everywhere. Don't come back until the whole place is shining." Obedience had become second nature to the girls, who instantly complied. Her adolescent son answered the door as they approached her home and knocked. "We should cook and clean," Mommy said. One of them gave an explanation. The youngster gave a shrug. "She came in without telling me anything." Uninterested, he moved away and returned to his phone. After entering the home and tying wraps around their waists, the apprentices began preparing food. After finishing, they started cleaning, wiping furniture, vacuuming the living room, and dusting bookcases. They had no intention of going inside Madame Tim's bedroom, but when her son passed by, he muttered absently, "Make sure you clean Mommy's room too, she likes it neat." This prompted them to open the door. The place was tidy inside. The closet was slightly open, and the bed was set up correctly. One apprentice froze as he bent over the bedside table as they were cleaning. "What is this?" she whispered. The others came closer. There, beside the bed, half hidden under a wrapper, sat a black clay pot. Old, dusty, odd. The girls exchanged confused looks. One finally said, "Call her son." He entered cautiously, scowled at the pot, and said, "What is this thing doing here? Maybe he knows what it is." He muttered, "My mom doesn't use things like this. Please pack everything. Clean up the whole corner." "So, we should remove it?" one asked. "Yes," now he said, shrugging. "Throw out whatever is useless. I don't know why she kept that ugly thing there." He left the room. The apprentices looked at one another. It wasn't their place to question anything. They were told to throw it away. So, they wrapped the pot in an old nylon and emptied it into the trash outside without a second thought. They finished cleaning the room, locked the door, and returned to the salon before evening. Nothing seemed unusual at first, but slowly, quietly, something began to shift. That evening, one of the apprentices sat alone after work and felt her mind clear in a way she hadn't felt in years. She suddenly remembered the life she planned for herself, the dreams she had before entering Tim's salon. Another apprentice walked home thinking, "How long have I been there? Why am I not gaining any knowledge?" A third realized she had forgotten what ambition even felt like as she sat on her bed and gazed at her hands. More trainees had the same peculiar wake-up by the next morning. It was as if a thick mist had cleared from their thoughts. Their eyes were attentive as they entered the salon, perplexed, conscious, and asking questions. Tim saw right away. There was a problem. Their features were too free, their eyes too brilliant, and their movements too assured. It felt dangerously incorrect. Her gut twisted with uneasiness as she watched them intently all morning, and suddenly it dawned on her. Fear shot up her chest, piercing and suffocating. She let go of the comb and ran to her home. She opened her bag with shaking fingers, then her clothes, and then every nook and cranny where she stored the pot. The pot has vanished. Her heart was racing. She didn't hold off any longer. She hurried to the landlady's door and knocked so forcefully that the older woman believed something horrible had occurred. As soon as she heard the account, the landlord wanted to know, "Where's the pot?" I don't know," stumbled Tim. The landlady's expression clouded as she said, "I can't find it. Something is happening to the girls. They're acting different." "You foolish woman," she yelled. "That pot must never be misplaced. Go back. Search everywhere. Bring it to me immediately." But it was too late. Tim knew it. She could feel it in the tremble of her hands, in the way her apprentices looked at her with eyes no longer clouded. In the heavy silence that followed her around the salon, something had been broken. Something she couldn't fix. Something she never imagined losing. The pot was gone, and without it, the invisible chains she had placed on all those girls had begun to loosen, one apprentice at a time. Nothing in Madame Tim's salon remained the same. They noticed things they had ignored for years. How they never learned anything. How she used them only for chores. How she never allowed them touch customers' hair. How time kept passing without progress. How their dreams had become blurry. One girl whispered, "Do you know I've been here for almost 3 years?" "I thought I came 6 months ago," another person said in response. "Why do I remain here?" A third added, "I don't even understand how I stayed this long." Their voices were soft, but Tim heard every word, and each one tore through her like a blade. Her cold confidence began to crack. All day, she hovered around them, trying to regain control. "Focus. Sweep that corner properly. You there, don't stand idle. Stop gossiping. Get back to work." But her voice no longer grazed their hearts the way it once did. It no longer bent their will. It no longer overshadowed their thoughts. The invisible pull she relied on was gone. They finally saw her clearly, not as a teacher, not as a helper, but as a woman who had held them back. By early afternoon, 3 apprentices quietly folded their bags and walked out of the salon. They didn't announce it. They didn't argue. They simply left. Tim felt the first wave of fear. By the next day, more girls left. Some told her boldly, "I didn't come here to be your maid." Others simply said, "I'm done." Within a week, the once busy salon was almost empty. The air felt different, lighter, but colder. Customers began to notice something was wrong. They walked in, saw the emptiness, and asked, "Where are your girls? How did your apprentices fare? What is the reason for their departure?" Zob forced nervous smiles. "They weren't serious," she lied. "They didn't want to learn. But people in the community talk. They talk quickly. They talk deeply." Parents of former apprentices started speaking to each other. Stories came out. Complaints surfaced. Whispers grew louder. And the more they shared, the more uneasy the community became. Some customers began avoiding her salon. Some stopped passing in front entirely. Some said quietly, "Hairstylists are many. Let me go somewhere safer." That word "safer" cut deeper than anything else. Within 2 weeks, Zinab's salon was nearly empty. Customers no longer walked in with smiles. Some crossed the street to avoid her. Some didn't even look at her door. Her reputation cracked, then crumbled. One afternoon, a longtime customer arrived, looked around the silent salon, and whispered to another woman outside, "I don't know what is happening here, but let me not put myself at risk. Things are not normal." The whispers spread like wildfire, and Tim sensed that the collapse she had never anticipated had now arrived at her door. She returned to her landlady many times, terrified and frantic, whispering, "They are all leaving. Customers have stopped coming. Please, Please give me another pot, another charm, something. But the landlady's face remained stone cold. There is nothing I can do, she said. You lost the first pot, and the pot doesn't choose the same person twice. Find it, Tim begged, or help me get another. No, the landlady said firmly. Your time is up. Tim stared at her in disbelief. The woman who once gave her power now turned her away like a stranger. That night, she cried alone in her room, the same room where her control once lived. She searched the house again. She checked under the bed, behind drawers, inside old clothes. Nothing. The pot was gone forever, and without it, nothing held the apprentices down. Nothing protected her reputation. Nothing shielded her business. Within a month, her salon was a shell of its former self. The chairs remained empty. The wig stands gathered dust. The dryers sat untouched. The customers never returned. People said quietly, "That place is not ordinary. There was a problem. Better to stay away." Fear spread faster than the truth. In the end, Madame Tim returned each morning to a salon without movement, without noise, without life. Her downfall wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. No one confronted her. No one accused her directly. Her punishment was silence, isolation, loss. The apprentices she once controlled now worked in other places, growing, learning, shining. And Tim, she was left alone with the choices she made, choices that had finally turned back against her. My people, this is how the mighty fall. Not always with thunder, not always with fire, but sometimes with quiet consequences that no charm can undo. The pot was gone. The control was gone. Her salon was gone. And in the end, only she remained, facing the kind of emptiness she once pushed onto others. Let us learn from the fall of Madame Tim. She wanted her apprentices to remain small because she feared they would outgrow her. But what she did not understand is this. When you fight another person's destiny, you fight your own peace. When you dim someone's light, your own day becomes darker. Tim believed that if those girls succeeded, she would fail. But life is not like that. Success is not a river with only one cup. If one person drinks, there is still water for the next. Envy makes you believe there's not enough room for everyone. She tried to hold them back with chores, manipulation, and finally a charm. But no matter how long wickedness stands, it must fall. And when it falls, the collapse is always louder than the rise. Thank you for watching, besties. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And to all my returning subscribers, thank you for always supporting this channel. And to my new viewers, I appreciate every one of you. See you in the next story. Stay blessed.